Embassy Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you live on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live, download our free app, stream all of our live local shows, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and the Jake Feinberg Show, and we appreciate you making us part of your day today. Without further ado, I want to bring in legendary character, a guy who's still got both feet on the ground, back from his days woodshedding in North Florida, out to Hollywood, California, in the studio scene, cooking the groove with Brent Mydland on Silver, Mudcrutch, and really spending a lot of his time, in the last several decades, basically teaching in Nashville, which is still a hotbed of studio activity. Tom Leadon, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks. It's good to be here, Jake.
Great to talk to you, my friend. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. You know, it's a Saturday. That's my favorite day of the week. And I was just outside doing some maintenance on my property. And, it's just a nice day. You don't have to go to work on Sunday, so you don't have to worry about it.
I dig, man. I wanted to ask you something about, if you could just talk a little bit about the growing up with your brother and how you guys, if you could paint the picture of the regional music of your hometown, your regional hotbed of activity, and kind of the music that you guys, used to create on your own just growing up.
Well, my brother, was a big influence on me, probably my biggest influence, other than possibly my mother, who was a keyboard player. But we moved to Gainesville, Florida in 1964, and we found a really vibrant music scene there. And I want to recommend a new book that's out. It's called Music Everywhere by Marty Gerard, who was also a musician in that area, and he was in the Motels later. He played in a band with Stan Lynch called the Road Turkey. They were friends of ours, but he just wrote a really good book all about the scene in Gainesville, the whole history of it. It's really excellent. I recommend it. And you can find it on Amazon. But anyway, the thing about Gainesville, it's a university town, and when we moved there, it was a pretty small town, about 50,000 people, and there were a lot of dance gigs. The Beatles had been out, and the thing to do with young people was have a live band, and that was just great for the musicians. You don't really find that anymore, where there's so many jobs for the young musicians. So people were getting bands together and getting out and getting work, So I started, my brother, first of all, he had a band that was really popular in Gainesville. They were the most popular band in town, called the Mondy Quintet, which included Don Felder, that was later in the Eagles. And
what was the name of the group called? What was it called?
It was the Maundy Quintet, Maundy. That's a Catholic word for the Thursday before Easter or something like that.
Very cool. Continue.
And we're Catholics, and so Bernie thought of the Maundy, and one of the other guys said, "Well, there's 5 of us, so we're the Maundy Quintet." Anyway, it was just a word, that sounded sort of English or something, and they were doing, the British invasion music and soul music that was always popular down there, Memphis Stax stuff, and just a variety of things. And Bernie actually was working in some bluegrass and country music, so they were one of the first country rock bands, when you think it was 1964 or 5. But anyway, I used to tag along and go to the fraternity parties and watch them play and everything. And then I would sit in the room with Bernie and Don Felder. Don Felder lived less than a mile from us, and he would come over every day and sit in my brother's room with my brother, and they would just jam for hours and hours. And they didn't mind me sitting there and listening. And one day they went out to take a break, and I picked up one of the guitars and started doodling with it, and I just haven't ever quit. And then some other older friends of my other older brothers saw me playing, and they talked my parents into having me in their band. I was only 14, And so I was going out and making money at dances, and then I was in another band at junior high. And then I knew these guys Tom Petty was working with. I had jammed with them once. They were the Epics. And so they invited me over to a rehearsal at Petty's, and that's how I met Tom. And we started hanging out pretty much every day. And he was only 16. I was 14. And we became best friends. We were just pretty much inseparable. And pretty soon, after a couple months, they got me in the band. And the other guys were older, you know, so we were exposed to a lot of crazy things. These other guys were real party guys, and you know, we had some wild weekends traveling around Florida playing gigs, and I quit playing sports because I couldn't do the rehearsals and the football practice and basketball practice, so I quit that. And then after we were with the Epics for, I guess about almost 3 years.
Let me. I don't want to. Let me stop you for a second. You've been throwing a lot.
Yeah, stop me because I'm going to ramble.
No, I dig. It's all good. I dig. We're live here with worldwide with Tom Leadon here. It's such an honor to connect with this cat. Thank you, by the way, to Herb Peterson for connecting us. Another mensch. But can you talk? Yeah. Can you talk about just what you? You talked about your mother being a keyboard player, but specifically, what did you, looking back on it, what were you influenced by Bernie the most? I mean, you guys are a prolific brother tandem in music, and there are some of them out there, but, you know, I'm thinking back to the swamps and the bogs and the amount of land that was there. I've interviewed cats like Dr. John. So many of the themes of songs came out of the environments of those times, and I wanted to know about the indigenous stuff that, you know, if you could point to maybe one specific thing that you and your brother did, or you know, that where you collaborated on something and you turned nothing into something.
My brother is 5 years older than me, and we actually have never collaborated very much. And I always looked up to him as a kid. He was in a marching band, played in trombone in San Diego where we were kids. So I got a trumpet, you know, when I was 8 years old, and got in the school band and did that until we moved to Florida when I was in the 7th grade. And then in Florida, the thing also about my brother that should be interesting is that he started out in folk music.
Right.
His favorite group was the Kingston Trio, and our whole family loved folk music. And the first concert I went to was the Kingston Trio, and the first instrument I tried to play was a ukulele. You know, playing "Hang Down Your Head, Tom Dooley," until somebody hid the ukulele, and nobody would ever tell me where it was. Yeah, they still haven't owned up to that, and so that was the end of my ukulele career. But anyway, I was like 7 years old. And anyhow, when we moved to Florida, it wasn't as much of a folk scene as San Diego had been. It was much more of a rock and roll scene, much more electric bands. And as soon as Bernie, you know, got into the local scene there, within weeks it seemed, pretty soon, one day he came home and he had an electric guitar and an amplifier. And even though I loved the Kingston Trio and folk music, when the Beatles came out, we were still in San Diego. I was 11, and I was completely thrilled with what they were doing. And when he brought home the Chet Atkins Gretsch Tennessean that was just like George Harrison played in the movie Help, and he had his Fender pre-CBS blackface bandmaster with the little black Fender reverb unit. And, you know, my brother's an excellent player, and right away he started playing, and this sounded like, wow, this is fantastic. You know, he was just so good on it right away. Anyway, so then he got in this band that soon had Don Felder in it, and Felder was the best guitarist in the whole area there. he was a contemporary of Dwayne Allman. He was about on that level. And Dwayne and Greg and their Almond Joys and later the Allman Brothers were from Daytona Beach.
That's right.
And they were friends of Don and Bernie. And anyway, I didn't really meet them back then. I saw them play a couple times, but back to the point, Bernie was soon into electric music, and so I was going to all these gigs, and I started seeing all these different bands. And so, when I got an opportunity to be in a band, I just jumped into it, and then, I just love doing, to this day, that's my favorite thing to do, is to be in a band and play, in a group. And so Mudcrutch, we played with the Epics for 3 years, and then the other guys quit, and then we had Jim Lenahan, that was later Tom's lighting director for the Heartbreakers, but he was our lead singer. And then we got with Randall and Mike Campbell and made Mudcrutch. And then soon Lenahan left the band, and Tom became the lead singer, and it was the four of us for a couple of years. I actually left the band in the summer of '72, right before Ben Montinch joined, which I really regretted once I heard what he was doing with them. But now we recently have had a chance to make up for that.
Well, let me ask you, can you talk a little bit? I want to just ask you a sort of a esoteric philosophical question I talked to the cats about, is that, even with in that early '70s period, you had a lot of rock groups that were using incorporating jazz aesthetics within their tunes, the stretching tunes out, making them more just more jam based.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, as a bass player, if you could talk about the idea, your concept. I talked to a lot of cats. You have to do it well, but I want to get your concept on the idea of when you're in the middle of a free-form improvisational jam. Could be with Mudcrutch and Tom Petty when he's walking around telling you to play longer, but you're really in the moment and you lose the one, okay? You lose where the one is. And the idea is that any note can be the one. I want to get I want you to talk about that concept of, because we're living in a very formulaic time as it relates to music. I mean, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And I want you to talk about that. People are very hyped up on always knowing where the one is. You got to know where the one is. Know where the one is. But the idea is, if you get lost, to not freak out. I want you to talk about the concept in your mind of any note can be the one.
Well, it's really interesting that you bring that up, because that gives me a strong memory of a man that I learned so much from in music, that I played with in a band for 3 years. Very famous musician, James Jamerson, the bass player.
You played with Jamerson?
Yeah, for a couple years, a lot.
Well, hold on. And you were what instrument were you playing?
I was playing lead guitar.
Okay, continue.
He played bass.
Right, because he's a bass. Okay, go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah, this is. I met him in Los Angeles in must have been 1978, and I was just freelancing around town. I had decided I didn't want to go on the road for a while. I just wanted to do studio work. And I met James, and I always loved all those old Motown records. And when I found out he played on virtually all the old Motown records that I loved, I was just thrilled to be playing with him. And we played clubs and parties all around Southern California for a couple years. And we also had Lee Allen in the band from That's Domino and Little Richard's groups from New Orleans, and he was the sax player. And we had a couple of other guys that were really good, some studio players.
What was the name of the group?
But it was called the Tom Leadon Band.
Okay, first of all, you're telling me that you just ran into Jamerson somewhere? I'd love to know how you actually, you know what? First off, I want you to talk about his concept of, I could not have asked for any.
I want to get to that about the one, what he said about the one. But I was at the Musicians Union, and there was a guy there, Jimmy Clark, and if you were available for work, you signed up there, and I signed up with him because Max Herman, the president of the union, told me that's what I ought to do. and James' name was there. He's looking for work, and I couldn't believe it. And I called his house, and his wife answered, and I said, "Are you sure you don't mean James Jamerson Jr.?" "No, Senior." So I had a gig that I got through the union, and I said, "You want to do this gig with me?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "You want to come over to my place and rehearse?" I said, "Yeah." And so we met over there with some other musicians, and we just got along great. He was like, everybody loves the vintage equipment. Well, he was like a vintage musician. He had all his original equipment. He had his old pre-CBS Fender bass. He had his Ampeg B15 bass amp, or he had the bigger custom Roland pleated bass amp. And I called him for a gig. He said, "You want the smaller amp or the bigger amp?" And he could play upright bass fantastically as well, so sometimes he did that. But we never got to record with that group, unfortunately. And he told me one time when he moved to L.A., one thing that really frustrated him, he was on a gig or a session, and one of the other musicians in the middle of it started crying out, "Where's one? Where's one?" He was freaking out, "Where's one?" And James got really annoyed with this guy, and he said, "Here's one. One. In other words, any beat could be one.
Right.
That's the way he thought of it. And that just that thought really opened me up. I've thought of it, I've always kept that in mind. And so let's say I'm jamming with Mudcrutch or whatever, and you get in that place where it gets so turned around, you kind of lose where the beat is. I always remember that the beat could be anywhere. Any downbeat could be one, and you just go from there. And it is kind of comforting when you know where the one of a 4/4 is. But if you lose it, don't freak out. Just go with it, and you might create something really beautiful.
That is so. Can you talk about? For a lot of cats, they say it was when whoever explained it to them, or whether it was this guy or Jamerson or that, it just fundamentally changed their perspective on music. Do you feel like it changed how you viewed how to play after that? That story that he relayed to you. What I'm trying to get at is the idea of just feeling more.
Yes,
go ahead.
Among many other things he told me, we talked a lot.
What else did he talk? You got to talk. Go ahead.
He said this several times to me. Keep it plain and simple. I mean, that's the kind of down to earth advice he would give. Keep it plain and simple.
Was he referring to not spastically playing notes for the sake of playing notes? Is that what he was kind of getting at?
Well, he was referring to. He told me, he used to tell the band at Motown. He was like the leader of the studio band there.
Of course.
Keep it plain and simple. Guys tend to. You know this. I mean, drummers always, especially young drummers, they want to play all their fills. They want to show what they can do. And not just drummers, all of us. The early Mudcrutch had that problem. I mean, Tom and I, we were really into country rock and kind of 3-minute songs. We got with Randall Marsh and Mike Campbell. They were more into Grateful Dead, free-form jamming. And
love it.
We kind of just merged the two ideas, and then we had a really crazy band, and we still do this. Like, I brought a bluegrass song for the album that we just did, The Other Side of the Mountain, and they, added all kinds of stuff to it for the record, and then when we rehearsed it, we put a whole coda on the end, which is a free-form jam, and that was Mike Campbell's idea. It was very much a Grateful Dead kind of idea, and it just every night it was different, and I just loved it, and it seemed like the audiences really loved it a lot.
We need to get a hold of some analog cassettes of this Tom Leadon band. This to me is just on. This must have been one of the most cooking bands in the L.A. area at that time.
Oh, we would come in, and one thing we did a lot of is I met a guy that knew all the blues people, so we started backing up all these legendary old blues artists that lived in L.A. They lived in South Central L.A., Baldwin Hills, and so I was working with Joe Turner, Big Mama Thornton, Lowell Fulson, and we would bring people in from other towns like Lightning Hopkins and Buddy Guy and Junior Wells, and back them up, and the people in the blues community were saying to me, "Man, you've got the best band,"
Wait, so this is so interesting because, I've done a couple interviews with Jim Keltner. Keltner used to go down and play. This is pre Jamerson Leadon. This is like, L.A. riots kind of in that South Central area. And there was this overlap of music, and there was, you had this, a lot of black clubs. And these cats were living. And so the idea is that your band would play the opening set and then like.
No.
Go ahead.
I was booking the gigs, and I'd book the gig, and then I'd book the artist. I've talked to the club, and I said, well, I can get Joe Turner and Lowell Fulson for such and such amount. And then I would call the band, and we've got a gig at such and such place and the date. Show up at such and such time, and I'll pay you this much. And we would all just show up and just jam. We would just play. It was really easy with Joe Turner because everything he sang was in the key of C, and you did not have to give him a chord, before he started singing. He was very elderly at the time, and he couldn't hardly walk, and he would come up to the stage from the audience on crutches, and he'd sit on the side of the stage, or maybe on a chair, and they just have the microphone on the stage, and he'd pick it up. And he'd just start singing, and you just start playing, and it was always in the key of C. And so the piano players loved him. They couldn't hardly make a mistake. And being that, they could hit all the white keys, and they would be in the key of C. And anyway, Mama Thornton, once I got used to her, she was really exciting to play with. She used to berate the band a lot and cuss at the band. And at first that kind of annoyed me, because here she is cussing at James Jamerson and Lee Allen and the rest of us.
Yeah, right.
But that was just her. That was her shtick, And one thing she did, her dynamics. I learned this from her. She'd get the band to play so quiet, and then more quiet, and then so quiet you could hardly hear the band. And then she'd sing really soft. And one night she actually started crying while she was singing, and it was the most emotionally wrenching thing. And then she brings the band back in full force, and the audience just falls out of their seats. It was just amazing. So these older blues singers, I really learned a lot from their stage experience. Some of them had been playing since the 30s, on stage.
Unbelievable. This is looking back on it, do you feel like the lineage, the ability to keep the links in the chain, did it go over on the crowd? I mean, this was in some ways the final chapter for some of these heavyweights from the early part of the 20th century. I mean, what kind of clubs did you play? Were you playing South Central, and did you feel like you ever were recognized as being able to give some exposure to these? I mean, I feel like in so many ways what I've been doing.
Yeah.
You go ahead. I mean, just riff on that.
Yeah, like we played with Lowell Fulson at the Golden Bear, which is a big name club.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, sure. Huntington Beach.
That place down
Huntington Beach, yeah.
Orange, yeah, Huntington Beach. And, there was, 1,000, 1,500 crazy surfer blues fanatics there. and we opened for Albert King. And, it was James Jamerson and Lee Allen and Jerry Conway, the English drummer, and Steve Goldstein, the keyboard player, and me. And we had actually rehearsed with Lowell the day before, because that was the first time we ever played with him, which we never used to rehearse usually. That was part of the attraction of my band, is you could just show up at the gig and play. You didn't have to do a rehearsal, because it was blues that we were playing, and traditional blues. But that was a fantastic show. I do have a lot of that on a cassette tape somewhere.
Wow.
And we played several. We had kind of a monthly series we did at the Belly Up Club in San Diego, where, you know, we had certain blues artists that we worked with regularly, like Lowell Fulson and Joe Turner and Big Mama Thornton, and then we brought Buddy Guy and Junior Wells from Chicago. We did a tour up the coast. We played the Sweetwater and Redondo Beach and the Belly Up and the Blues Society in Santa Barbara, and then we played the Old Waldorf in San Francisco. But I didn't take my band up there. That was one of Bill Graham's clubs, and there was a couple thousand people there, and it was sold out. And we used Mark Naftalin's band. Mark Naftalin was in the Paul Butterfield band.
I know. I've been trying to drag him on my program for a while. Yeah, no, he's a heavy cat, big cat, good cat.
Well, I just talked to him, and you know, I said, I hear you have a blues band. He was playing at a blues band in San Francisco, and I said, you know, we can pay you such and such, and he said, yeah, that'd be fine. And we just met him right before the show, and I jammed with his band a little, and then we brought Buddy Guy out, and we jammed behind him, and then he brought Junior Wells out, and, you know, it was fantastic. I never saw him again since then, so if you talk to him, tell him I said hi, and I really was thrilled to play with him.
Talking to Tom Leadon here on the Jake Feinberg Show. I just wanted to know, also, could you talk about, so many of the jazzers played burlesque clubs. I interviewed Ahmad Jamal earlier this year, and I didn't know. In my opening monologue, I referred to playing burlesque clubs, and he said, how'd you know I did that? And I said, I don't know, I just took a guess because all the cats did it. And sure enough, the early incarnations of Mudcrutch, I believe you had a gig with go-go dancers. Can you put us inside?
Oh, yeah,
Can you put us inside? What I'm getting at is, these were like, in every part of the country, Tom, you know this, at that time, those were sustainable paying gigs for artists. You had the Combat Zone in Boston. You had places all over the country. Those were places for cats to play 2 sets, 3 sets a night, and you'd get money for it. But yet you were playing for dancers. I wanted you to talk about that experience with and how that really helped, if it helped Mudcrutch grow and feel more comfortable with their own voice.
Oh, yeah. Oh, completely. Well, when we played this place it was called Dub's Steer Room. We just called it Dub's, D-U-B. Dub was the guy. And he'd been to California and seen some clubs in L.A. or San Francisco, some topless places. And I had been there once before. You know, I was underage. I was only 18 when we started playing there. I'd seen Jim Lenahan's band that he was in before he was in Mudcrutch play there one time, and anyway, Jim Lenahan knew Dub, and we started playing, rehearsing with Mike Campbell and Randall Marsh out at their house, which later became known as the Mudcrutch Farm. We had some festival shows there that we put on later. Wow.
It was a full-on like communal place to live, and it was a farm kind of place?
Well, it was like, it was this tin roof, little 2-bedroom wooden place, like an old farmhouse, out on the very edge of town. I mean, the last road in the city limits, you take a dirt road out into the woods about a quarter mile, and it sat there by itself. And we were rehearsing there, and we got some songs together, and Jim Lenahan brought Dub over there, and he heard us play, and he agreed to hire us. And so then we were to start the next week or something, and Tom came out and to where I was working, and I was working on the grounds department at the University of Florida, and I walked off my job and never went back. And we started playing that night, and we got in there. We were all excited, and it was air conditioned, and I'd been in the hot sun all day at my job, and I was like, this is great, And then there were these cute girls, and I was like, oh yeah, they have topless dancers. I forgot. And they wanted to meet us and came over, and it was like, oh wow, okay.
This is unbelievable. I mean, were they calling out like Duke Ellington tunes? I know a lot of. I mean, like what kind of?
No, it wasn't jazz at all.
Yeah, no, I know, but I'm saying. I mean, were they? I mean, were you able to play a lot of original Mudcrutch tunes, or were you playing we top 40 stuff?
We did. The first night we played mostly our own stuff and just some oldies that we all knew, like Johnny B. Good and things like that, you know, some standard rock stuff for dancing, you know. But Dub hired us under the condition that we would learn top 40 stuff of that day, you know. And so we promised him we would. And so we played the first night, and we did our whole 15 songs or whatever it was. It was a 5-hour gig. I mean, 5 sets, 9 to 2. And it was
five
sets. It was 6.
Oh.
It was 5 sets, 6 nights a week. And there were 3 dancers each night, and 2 of them were dancing pretty much on every song, and then there was one taking a break, you know, and they would alternate. And anyway, we started playing, and these girls came walking up in the first verse of the song, and one of them goes to a little stage on one side, and one goes to a little stage on the other side, and they had these fringy leather top things that they quickly took off, and we started looking around and kind of laughing, you know. I was looking at Tom, and he was trying not to laugh, you know. And the trouble was the music practically stopped completely, while we were just, all of us were just, you know, just dying, you know. We never been in that situation. And anyway, so
I love it. I love it.
Once we got the song kind of going again, we got through the song, and we kept it together enough, and then we did our whole list of songs, and we just started doing them again. Well, the next day, once we recovered from that, we met there. We met there at the club. These were good-looking girls and very impressive. They were very well-endowed females, a credit to their gender, you might say. But
right.
The next day, we met at the club at noon or whatever it was, and Mike Campbell brought his reel-to-reel tape recorder, and we started putting quarters in the jukebox and recording the songs that were on the jukebox, and then we would learn the songs off the tape recording, the ones that we thought, you know, we could do with 2 guitars, bass, and drums, and a singer. And, you know, we learned about 20 songs off the jukebox in short order. I mean, I've been playing in top 40 bands, you know, my whole career up till then, really. And, you know, I was real quick at learning the songs, and Mike Campbell was also very good at it. And so we learned these songs really quickly. And it was funny because we start playing our sets, and then we take a break. We do 45 minutes and get a 15-minute break. And then as soon as we stop, they would crank up the jukebox. And it'd be all the same songs that we had just been playing. And I used to think, gosh, I hope we don't get in trouble for this, you know. But we had just learned all of our top 40 stuff right off the jukebox there, Tubbs.
Unbelievable. Yeah, can you talk about the idea of one of the L's on my show is lineage, another one is life, and what I mean by life is you know, overcoming adversity and how it made you stronger. And I think it's really awesome that Mudcrutch. I've been trying to get this wooden poster from the record shop here for your latest album. But can you talk about a time early in your collaborations with Tom Petty where you guys were fighting it a little bit? Could have been musically or on a personal level, but you know, I know you bonded quickly, but when you faced a little bit of adversity and turbulence and how you overcame it, how it made you stronger as a band.
Okay, you mean like personally between Tom and I, musically or
Absolutely.
personally.
No, because you know what I'm
and
getting.
then, and then we overcame it, and we kept on as a band. You're talking about before I left the band.
I'm talking about a period where you could have packed it in. It could have been an ego thing. It could have, it could have been music. It could have been personal. But ultimately, how did you overcome it, and how did it make you stronger? Even just personalize it to yourself. How it made you stronger as a person.
Well, I can tell you that I never had I never had a conflict with Tom that was serious enough for all of that until I left the band. And then at that time, we still remained friends, and it certainly strengthened me as a person and as a musician, but it was very difficult. But do you want me to talk about that? Or one time in the Epics, I had a little fist fight with him that didn't last but about half a minute.
No, I think ultimately you alluded to the idea that you maybe had some regret because once you started hearing the band after you left, the guy that took over was kind of thrashing around. Do you want to talk about how you felt when you left?
Yeah. Well, the thing that kind of wrecked me for Mudcrutch in those days was my family, all of us except my brother Bernie, went up to see my brother Bernie in Atlanta when he was first with the Eagles, and they were opening for Procol Harum, and I saw them play, and I just loved what they did, and it was more along the lines of what I really wanted to do, which was more of a country rock thing. And the rhythm was much simpler, like Don Henley on drums. He didn't do many fills. He just kept a steady beat.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't jam a lot. They sang songs. You could understand all the words. You could hear all the harmonies, which was great, of course. And they were very polished. You could tell they'd been in the studio. I mean, they just had that professionalism that we had not acquired yet. I mean, later on, of course, the Heartbreakers, they got all that after they'd been making records, that they got to that point, and we would have. But I was, 20 years old, and I was impatient, and I went back and played with Mudcrutch, and there was just a lot of jamming going on where there was just licks, the drums, the bass, there was nothing steady, and the beat wasn't steady because everybody was just riffing a lot. And, I became a little unsatisfied with that, and I just didn't see how it could be fixed, and it probably could have, but would have taken some time and a lot of work, But then I was going in a more bluegrass and country rock direction. And then we were out at Dubs, and I had an argument with the club owner because he was saying something about getting to the audience when he did his. They did this thing Thursday nights where they had a mini skirt contest with amateur girls up there stripping for the crowd, and it was really kind of disgusting. Right. I mean, I got to where I really didn't like having to play the background music for that, and he was, it wasn't Dub's fault. He was gonna expand his club, make it bigger, and he said, I'm gonna get bigger and better bands, and I'm thinking, okay, we're finishing our gig here this week, and then I was booking Mudcrutch, and I've got to go out and try to book gigs with us around town and with the university kids, and a lot of them are here, and and I felt he was running us down. And so I asked him not to say that. We had an argument, of course, because it was he had the right to say that, and he fired us. And then the band the next day, I was thinking, I really need to quit the band. And then Mike Campbell came by and told me that they were firing me, and it was a big moment. And so my brother had already invited me to California. That was the other thing. My brother invited me to come live with him in L.A. And And I was thinking that's how he got his start, kind of. I mean, he had a band offer that had a record deal when he went out there, but actually, I thought maybe I need to go out there by myself and get into this country rock scene that I really admire, and kind of work my way into it. And he offered me to stay with him, and so it was really kind of mutual, but when they told me I was out of the band, I was about to quit anyway. And so I just decided to go out there and do that. And, it was very difficult because they were my closest friends, and I went out to California. I knew nobody. Herb Peterson was one of my first friends that I met in the first few days I was there.
You couldn't have asked to meet a better. You couldn't have asked to meet a better cat, man. That's unbelievable.
Oh no, I had his album that he did, Copperfields, with the Dillards.
Right.
And I was a big fan when I was in Gainesville in Florida. And so 2 or 3 days after I moved there, I met him at the music store, Westwood Music, and we became friends. And so, my brother worked with him, with Clarence and Roland White, and I sat in with them at the Ash Grove Club in L.A.
Wow.
And then,
this is awesome.
Yeah.
You playing bass or guitar?
No, I was playing. Well, for them, I played rhythm guitar, acoustic guitar. I didn't play any solos because they had Clarence White.
I cannot believe this. This is unbelievable.
Herb Peterson and Byron Berline, and my brother was on dobro, Roger Bush on bass, and of course Clarence and Roland. And anyway,
I guess here's the point. You you were in the middle of this, like, you saw what you wanted with the Eagles. The Mudcrutch was kind of wanking it, for lack of a better word. But you, looking back on it, you felt like, it didn't end totally great the first time around, but
no.
it's what you needed to do. It's what you had to do.
It just seemed like there was just a lot of things going in that direction, and I felt all this pressure was building up, and certainly Tom Petty and myself were on. We were having a very rough relationship. There were other things that had happened, disagreements, and it probably was all going back to when I went to Atlanta and saw the Eagles, and my brother at that time invited me to California. Then it's like, looking back on it, I realized in my mind, it was like, I don't have to put up with this.
That's right.
I could be out of here and do what I've always wanted to do. The thing is, Tom and I, we talked about going to L.A. since we were, back in the Epics. I mean, but we were having this kind of falling out, and so it all came to a head, and it's really, in a way, if you could say, well, what if you had stayed with Mudcrutch? I think we would have gotten a lot better. I don't know if we would have made it because we were still country rock, and after I was in L.A. about a year or so, Clarence White died, then Graham Parsons died, and the Eagles went more rock and roll, and Emmylou Harris started doing her records through Nashville, and the country rock scene there pretty much died. It had been the Eagles were the most popular version, but there were all these country rock groups in the late 60s, the Byrds, Poco, the Flying Burrito Brothers, Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, and on and on. And that was dying off, and everything was going into pop or rock. And so what they did with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers was perfect timing, and I think that was part of why they became so successful, was because they hit it with just the right thing at just the right time. And I've always been really, really proud of them and happy for them. But to get another chance to do Mudcrutch more recently has just really been a joy, because when we play together, from the first session we did we all felt like we were home again. I think it's from growing up together and doing all those hundreds and hundreds of gigs together and rehearsals. I mean, we rehearsed 5 days a week, every week. From the time I met Tom, it was, a full-time thing pretty much. I mean, every day. And if it wasn't the weekend, we were practicing. And so, we really worked for years and years. But anyway, I'm just really happy about.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is just part one with Tom Leadon. We have a lot to carve out here. I was hoping one of my favorite individuals. I was born in 1978. It was well after your career even started. But I just wanted you to spend a little bit of time talking about character Brent Mydland, what you thought about him as a person, and then also his musicianship. Because I guess at this point I've interviewed. Haven't talked to Harry Stinson on live on radio yet, but I've interviewed Greg Collier. I've interviewed John Batdorf. Now I'm getting a chance to interview you. And Brent really, to me, is he arguably my favorite musician of all time. And I just wanted you to talk.
Wow.
I wanted you to talk about how I know that you were. It was interesting, but I'd like, from your perspective, to talk about joining Silver and Brent specifically.
Well, Harry Stinson was playing in this group, the Gypsy Hollow Boys, with Steve Ferguson and some other guys. And my brother Bernie had worked with their manager, John Hartman, who had worked with Geffen Roberts Management that had managed the Eagles. And he was asking Bernie about, I don't know, they were talking, and it turned out Bernie recommended me for this group, Gypsy Hollow Boys. So I went down, and I was playing bass mostly. There was a period of time where I became a bass player in L.A., mainly because there was a group that I really liked that had a steady club gig, and they needed a bass player. That was Mark Bookin and his band. And
where were they playing?
And they were playing at the Scotch and Sirloin on Pico and Sepulveda in L.A., and it was a 5-night-a-week gig,
I love it. You're playing electric bass or upright?
Electric bass.
Awesome.
Herb Peterson had played with them for a few months before that, and I had heard it was his last night playing with them, and he was leaving the band. So I had never been there, and I just knew it was on Pico and Sepulveda, so I found my way there and went in and listened to him. And I had met Mark Bookin, the leader, before, and he came up to me on the break, and he said, we're looking for a bass player. And I really liked their band. They had Ed Carter, who was for years a Beach Boy band member, and he was playing guitar really good. And so I just said to Mark, I play the bass. And so I borrowed my brother's Fender bass and went down there and sat in with them, and they hired me. And so I started, I bought the bass for my brother, and I started playing with them. And I did that for a year. And Steve Fishel joined the band on pedal steel. He's a producer here now and steel player in Nashville. And then anyway, Johnny Rivers used to come to the club and sit in with us. And he hired me to be his bass player, and I toured with him for a year.
Wow.
And then I was looking to get in my own band, where I wasn't just backing somebody else up. And so I joined the Gypsy Hollow Boys, and then Steve Ferguson quickly decided he wanted to be a solo act. And so Hartman and Goodman, the managers, had this other group, Silver, and they were a trio. It was Brent Mydland, Greg Collier, and the leader was John Batdorf.
Mm-hmm.
And they were on Arista Records with Clive Davis, and they needed a rhythm section. So Harry and I tried out for them, and then we auditioned for Clive Davis, and they all approved the whole thing. And so then we were in Silver. And Brent, right away, I liked his material. You could tell he was a good musician, and his songs had some nice changes, and he was an excellent singer. he could sing. He had a good range. He could sing really high, had kind of that nice raspy sound in his voice. And they had really good harmonies, a la the Eagles or Poco, something like that. And, we were like a country rock band, but a little leaning to the pop side. And that was an excellent band. And we toured around. We opened for groups like America and the Doobie Brothers and Hall & Oates and Poco and Chris Hillman and other groups like that. And we did some of our own clubs and things like that. Played the Troubadour in L.A. and places like that. And then we had a falling out over the selection of the producer of the second album. Clive Davis wanted us to use this guy that he liked, and John Batdorf wanted us to use Bill Halverson that had engineered Crosby, Stills and Nash. And we liked Bill, and our manager had a kind of a, conflict with Clive Davis. And the trouble is, Clive Davis, he was the record company, and so they suspended our contract, and we never even got to make our second album.
Did you feel like,
we broke up.
Right. No, it was short-lived. It just, and I also feel like the record doesn't encapsulate how powerful a band you guys, Silver, was. You guys could really cook. Brent had serious, great chops too. I just wonder if you guys ever had a chance to go off and just sort of, just kind of play improvisational music, especially like at the Troubadour and things like that. It must have been fun because the guy was classically trained, but he could play very. He was a heavy player.
Yeah, we all respected Brent a lot, his musicianship, and but the band was strictly arranged songs. We didn't leave room for free form jamming, and the other guys weren't really into that. So Brent was into that, and I would have been into it, but
sure.
We didn't do that. We stuck with the that group was so tight. That group was even tighter than Mudcrutch or the Epics. We practiced, 5 days a week for hours.
Collier too. Collier was there. Do you guys just work?
Oh yeah.
It was five-part harmonies.
Go out.
5-part harmony.
5-part harmony. All 5 of us sang.
Oh my God.
And Harry Stinson is one of the very top studio session singers in Nashville and has been for the last 30 years, as well as being one of the top studio drummers here. He plays with Marty Stewart and the Fabulous Superlatives, and they're great. But and then those guys, the 3 of them, Greg and Brent and John, they already had a really good 3-part harmony. And Brent, they all had range like crazy. I was the low singer. I'm the high singer in Mudcrutch. I was the low singer in Silver.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That is, listen.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We were so tight that when we would open for America or the Doobie Brothers, we would come out and it just sounded like a record. We were as tight as the Eagles, and they were really tight.
I just wanted, as we wrap up part 1 here with a classic individual, Tom Leadon.
Thank you.
Of course. Can you talk about your concept of love and how you bring love to your world?
To the music?
Any way you want to.
You mean?
Yeah. Well, if that, I'm just more importantly, what you believe your concept of love is. I feel like it's a fleeting feeling that we need to feel more. Mudcrutch is an example of love. Coming back.
Yeah.
But just conceptually, what is love to you? Obviously you bring it through. You can channel it through music, but what do you believe love? Your concept of love is?
Well, love is, to me, it's the greatest thing that we can give and receive. And, with people, we need to go beyond just sexual lust and really, build families that love each other and then love the community around us and our neighbors. And you know, a lot of this awful stuff that's going on nowadays in the world, it really shouldn't be going on, and we all know that. And for instance, killing people is, in my view, such a ridiculously stupid and useless thing, because we're all going to die. You know, we're all on death row. I hate to say that, bring it down, but that's the reality. And so we all need to help each other enjoy this life as much as we can and do the best we can for each other and for future generations. And music is a wonderful way to spread that. And yes, I did feel a lot of love within the band Mudcrutch, recording and doing the tour. I mean, that's the main thing. Tom and I, we love each other, going way back, and the rest of us going way back, not quite as far, but almost, you know. And when we all get together, we love each other a lot. And we just finished this tour, and I was really struck with all the love that we felt from the crowds. Every show was sold out, and the auditoriums weren't that big. I mean, anywhere from 1,000 to 2,500. Most of them 15 to 2,000 seaters, and the people were up close, and you could see them, and you could just see how happy they were. I mean, so I was just enjoying looking out and seeing all these happy people, and they just showed us so much love and kindness, and that feeling was just incredible, and I can't get enough of that. And so, I mean, I can't say enough about love, and I don't think that's an oversimplified question or naive or anything idealistic. I think it's the pertinent question.
Oh,
really.
I agree.
I appreciate you asking me.
You're darn right, man. I mean, I've been woodshedding for a long time, and it's all love. I'm not a musician, and it's so I appreciate. I don't know. I look forward to doing part 2 with you. I just want to, you know, keep going, digging down deep and finding ways of. I hope you had a ball. I had a ball with you today, man.
I did, Jake. I really did.
All right, brother.
I really enjoyed your questions and your encouragement, and I hope your listeners enjoyed it and didn't change the channel on us.
the loyalist, the Jake Feinberg Show fans are the loyalist fans. But either way, I'll get you a copy of this later tonight, and we'll plan for set 2 real soon.
Okay, Jake.
All right, brother.
Thanks
Have a beautiful day, man. Take care.
Okay, you too.
Later on.
Okay, bye.
Bye. And we'll be right back with Joanne Breckeen on the Jake Feinberg Show. It's just a beautiful afternoon here in the old Pueblo. Welcome back inside the Parisi Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is hour number 2 of the Jake Feinberg Show.